This episode is a little different. We're not going to focus on the culture of just one specific place. Instead, we'll be looking at things that share a common trait as I introduce you to beverages from all around the world. Without further ado, let's get started. But before we really dive in, I have a question for all of you. In the entire history of human civilization, what do you think is the most widely used addictive substance? Before I reveal the answer, let me tell you the runner-ups. In third place is nicotine from cigarettes. And in second place, we have alcohol. And taking the top spot is the caffeine that's commonly found in tea, cola, and coffee. According to research by anthropologist Eugene Anderson across all the world's languages, the three most frequently mentioned proper nouns are, you guessed it, tea, cola, and coffee. In fact, during the 20th century, coffee was the second most traded commodity in the world. What's that? You're asking what was number one? That would be oil. But for a very long time in the grand scheme of history, these three were actually, for the most part, just very regional specialties. I mean, let's not even talk about cola. That's a quintessential modern beverage. And it wasn't until after the 18th century that the consumption of coffee and tea really started to skyrocket. Before that, the annual consumption of both in Europe was only a few hundred tons. But long before tea, cola, and coffee took the world by storm, people from all over the globe were already seeking out caffeinated drinks. This led to the creation of many unique beverages that might seem unfamiliar to us today, but were household names in their own time and place. So today, instead of talking about those big-name drinks everyone knows, I'm going to show you some of the more obscure ones. Guarana, also known as Brazilian cocoa, Its caffeine content is as high as 3 to 6%, the highest of any known plant in the world. It's a climbing plant from the soapberry family that grows all over the Amazon basin in South America. And according to the Brazilians themselves, this stuff doesn't just fight fatigue. It also boosts your immune system, acts as an antioxidant, helps prevent obesity, and improves blood pressure. The guarana fruit looks like a bunch of grapes, and when it's ripe, the orange-red shell cracks open, revealing the white pulp and black seed inside. Just imagine you're walking alone through a rainforest, so dense you can barely see the sun. When you happen to pass through a patch of guarana bushes, and you suddenly see thousands of eyes staring right back at you. Man, if that were me, I probably would have jumped out of my skin right then and there. Its appearance is just so incredibly bizarre. I think the name the local indigenous people gave it is the most fitting: the mysterious eyes. I mean, back in those wild times when knowledge was extremely limited, you had the indigenous ancestors with piles and piles of this stuff growing right outside their homes. How could they not develop some kind of plant worship? That's why, even to this day, the local indigenous people still call themselves the Guarana people, and most of their myths and legends are tied to this magical plant. When it's time to harvest the guarana, people gather the fruit that's been picked, put it all together, snip the pulp from the stems, and then rinse it in water. And in the end, they're left with pure guarana seeds. Since in all the material I've read, I've never seen any mention of the fruit's pulp being used. It must not be worth very much. Which is a real shame, because in my imagination, it's supposed to be sweet and sour and taste just like a lychee. So it must not be worth very much. Which is a real shame, because in my imagination, it's supposed to be sweet and sour and taste just like a lychee. After being collected, guarana seeds have to go through a long roasting process. During this, they must be stirred constantly to ensure they heat up evenly. Once they're done roasting, they're crushed in a stone mortar. An experienced craftsman then needs to add just the right amount of water, which is how you get a guarana dough with the perfect consistency. This dough is then shaped into long sticks and left to air dry. To drink it, you first scrape a stone against the guarana stick to create a powder, then mix it with water and drink up. Of course, it's not that complicated anymore. You can buy ready-made guarana powder anywhere in Brazil, and all sorts of sodas with guarana are also huge favorites among Brazilians. But you can totally make it yourself if you want to. Guarana drinks are usually mixed with different kinds of fruit juices. If you want to get fancy, you can add some mint or lemon. Just add some guarana powder. Pour in some black tea, throw in some ice, and pair it with a local quindim dessert. And you've got yourself a super chic afternoon tea. Cocoa is a plant that originated in the Americas but became famous in Africa, with about 230 milligrams of caffeine per 100 milliliters. Cocoa was first cultivated way back around 1500 BC during the time of the Olmecs. Later on, the Spanish arrived and heard about cocoa from the Aztecs. The word we use for chocolate today is said to come from the Aztec pronunciation for their cocoa drink. In the Aztec language, the word means bitter water. After that, there was a Spanish missionary named de Sahagún. This guy was basically a huge fan of Aztec civilization. He spent over 50 years studying Aztec civilization. Cocoa was first cultivated around 1500 BC by the Olmecs. That's when they started growing it. Later on, the Spanish arrived and heard about cocoa from the Aztecs. The word we use for chocolate today is said to get its origin from the Aztec pronunciation for their cocoa drink. The word means bitter water in the Aztec language. After that, there was a Spanish missionary named de Sahagún. This guy, the missionary, was basically a huge fan of Aztec civilization. He spent over 50 years He studied the religious culture and history of the Aztecs, and eventually wrote a magnificent masterpiece called The General History of the Things of New Spain. In the book, he also made a point to record how the Aztec people made their cocoa drink. He said the locals would first grind cocoa into a powder, then add a suitable amount of water, and pour it back and forth between 2 cups to create a rich foam. And among the other drink recipes he recorded, there was even a wild concoction made by mixing cocoa with cornmeal and chili peppers. A pretty dark beverage indeed. In short, back in the day, cocoa was considered a gift from the heavens in the Americas. It was a gift to humankind from the feathered serpent god. Cocoa beans were even used as local currency. When a food with a strange taste was brought back to Europe, its first identity, 9 times out of 10 was as an aphrodisiac. And cocoa was no exception. However, due to its dry, bitter taste, it soon became a miracle cure, used to treat all sorts of digestion-related ailments. That is, until people discovered that when cocoa was mixed with honey and vanilla and then heated, its bitterness would transform into an incredibly rich and sophisticated flavor. And so the chocolate drink quickly won over the European aristocracy. The French philosopher and writer of erotic literature, the Marquis de Sade, was a huge fan of chocolate. This guy even wrote to his wife from prison, asking her to send him some cocoa powder and cocoa butter. The powder was for drinking, of course, but what about the butter, huh? Europeans used it to, stay regular. Before the 19th century, cocoa drinks were very much a luxury for the nobility. It wasn't until cultivation expanded and the Dutch chemist von Houten invented the cocoa press technology that cocoa became a drink for the common people and even a breakfast drink for children. Around 1870, cocoa trees started to be transplanted to Africa. Fueled by the brutal slave economy, cocoa production increased even more. West Africa gradually replaced Latin America, becoming the world's center for cocoa production. By the end of the 20th century, Africa's cocoa supply accounted for 55% of the global total. Meanwhile, the output from its country of origin, Mexico, had dropped to a pitiful 1.5%. Cola nuts contain about 1.5 to 2.5% caffeine, and they're native to West Africa. At first, the locals would just chew on them raw. But they did discover that the nuts could wake them up, give them a buzz, and even act as an aphrodisiac. But this crop didn't make it into global trade until much later. That's because cola nuts dry out easily, making them hard to store and transport. So naturally, their commercial value couldn't compare to coffee or tea. That all changed with the invention of Coca-Cola. Actually, before the cola we know today, it had 2 ancestors. One was Vin Mariani, which was infused with coca leaves, and the other was Calisaya wine, which had cola nuts in it. Let's focus on the Calisaya wine for a bit. Basically, it was just wine mixed with powdered spices and cola nuts. Back then, Calisaya wine was all the rage in Europe, as a drink to sober you up. It didn't matter if you were a rich person who'd had too much brandy, or a commoner who'd overdone it on cheap gin. Just 1 glass of Calisaya wine, and your health bar would be full again. Within half an hour, you were ready for round 2. There was even this extremely politically incorrect saying back then: even a black person dead drunk will sober up within half an hour after just one sip. You could say that Coca-Cola was originally a type of medicinal tonic. It contained alcohol, as well as coca leaves and cola nuts. Just imagine how much of a kick Coke must have had back then. It's no exaggeration to call it the devil's drink. Later, to appease the temperance advocates, Dr. Pemberton removed the alcohol from Coke. His successor in 1903 removed the coca as well. Then, in the 1990s, they stopped using cola nuts altogether. That's because caffeine produced industrially was much cheaper. So the Coke we have today, compared to what they had back then, is basically just a sweet carbonated drink. Yerba mate, out of all the drinks we're talking about today, probably has the lowest caffeine content. It's generally less than a third of what's in coffee. The main ingredient in yerba mate comes from the leaves of the Paraguayan holly tree. It's estimated that in South America, the number of consumers who enjoy this drink is over 20 million. Brewing yerba mate is actually a pretty particular process. While it's not as elaborate as our Asian tea ceremonies, it does have its own set of rules. There are two essential pieces of equipment. First is the container for brewing the tea. It has to be a round-bodied, wide-mouthed cup made from a gourd. The gourd is one of the first plants humans learned how to use. It's said that ancient humans first brought it out of Africa and spread it all over the world. The people in the Americas back then naturally knew how to use the materials around them. And then, the straw used for drinking the tea is also very specific. It even has a special name. It's called a bombilla. Now, I don't really get the reason for the name, because I looked it up, and the word means bomb in Spanish. I'm sure there's an expert in the comments section. If anyone knows the story behind it, please do us a favor and explain. What's so special about this straw is that it has a filter at the bottom to keep you from sucking up the tea leaves. That's really neat. It makes me want to buy one. We could totally use this for drinking that sky full of stars tea. Another thing is the water for brewing mate tea. It shouldn't be too hot. 70 to 80 degrees. Basically, when the water starts to bubble, but isn't boiling yet, is perfect. That's pretty different from how we do things. Where I'm from, we usually say, you can't have tea that's too fragrant, or water that's too hot. You absolutely have to use boiling water. You pour it from way up high, crashing into the tea leaves, and you need to get a thick layer of foam for it to be the real deal. Then to top it off, you slice half a beauty heart radish. And that in my book is the ultimate setup. Also, I've heard the flavor of this mate tea is pretty bizarre. It has a very intense taste, but this intensity isn't like any of the familiar spicy or pungent flavors we're used to. It's a completely new kind of taste experience, and the aftertaste is very bitter. All in all, it's totally unique. The most amazing thing about mate tea is that you can brew it over and over again. You can get more than 20 infusions from a single serving of leaves. Of course, you do use a lot of tea leaves. It's best to fill the container about 2/3 of the way. After you fill it, it's like you're mixing a cocktail. There's even a step where you have to shake it hard. But hearing that you can brew it 20 times really blew my mind. I remember our general saying goes something like, the first steep is just a wash, the second brings out the tea. But the third and fourth are where the real flavor is. But the fact that this can be steeped 20 times, that's some serious staying power. Just because of those 20 infusions, I immediately went online and started searching for it. You can actually buy it, and it's pretty cheap too. Back in the day, there was one that was considered Coca-Cola's greatest rival was an American named Harvey Wiley. He was the founder of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and was known as the father of pure food. He was against consuming any food or drink that contained addictive ingredients, and he was especially against Coca-Cola. He classified Coke as an addictive substance, and based on that, he came up with a definition for what an addictive substance is. It's any stimulating drink that has no nutritional value and only serves to directly stimulate your organs or nervous system, leading you to crave it over and over again. According to this standard, the caffeine in Coke would definitely be considered addictive. But this definition is actually a bit debatable. That's because nutritional value is a pretty subjective concept. I mean, think about it. Sweets and fried foods are all known to make our brains release dopamine. Can they be addictive? Oh yeah. Do they have nutritional value? Yep. Are they bad for you? Absolutely. So, can we live without them? Not really. So the key is really moderation. The world is full of temptations after all. That's why Plato said, temperance is a kind of orderliness, a mastery over certain pleasures and desires. So in the end, the US didn't ban Coca-Cola. Instead, at Harvey Wiley's insistence, they made the company cut the amount of caffeine in Coke by half. Caffeine. It's the booster for pretty much every popular drink in the world, and the launchpad that sent them global. But when we enjoy it, we should also remember that it's good to be principled, but there's no need to get overly philosophical about it. Anyway, since it's the middle of summer, I've got a drink recipe of my own to share with you all. First, you cut a lime into wedges and squeeze out the juice. Then add some soda water, and then add honey or passion fruit for sweetness. After that, just chill it and enjoy. What's so great about this drink is its light, refreshing flavor, with a perfectly balanced sweetness from honey or passion fruit that doesn't overpower it, plus that bubbly fizz from the soda water. When you get back from work or the gym all tired and hot, you grab one of these from the fridge and chug it down, and let out a satisfying burp. Talk about refreshing, it's the perfect way to cool down. By the way, if you have any drink recipes of your own, feel free to share them in the comments section. Let's all trade some ideas. It's always fun to enjoy things together. This video is coming out right around the Mid-Autumn Festival. The air is clear and the moon is full.